If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
State Representative Hannah Kelly comes from a family with a long record of public service, and the Mountain Grove Republican is trying to make her mark in the Missouri House, especially when it comes to health care and agriculture issues. Kelly joins us next on the latest edition of Politically Speaking, so let's hit the music.
This is Politically Speaking, the longest-running episodic podcast about Missouri politics.
It's a little complicated in Bolivar because there is a Parsons family there.
But we also knew that it was important to make sure that we got to where we needed to go.
You know, if you walk in a room and you're getting ready to make a decision and everybody in the room looks like you need to stop.
And right now what happens in the United States Senate is as critical as anywhere else in the country.
I really want the state to succeed.
Well, we want everybody to know that we're all working together.
I just worked hard to try to build my name where I didn't have the money.
And welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm your host, political correspondent for St. Louis Public Radio, Jason Rosenbaum. Joining me in studio today is my co-host,
Julie O'Donohue.
And hailing all the way from beautiful and scenic Mountain Grove, Missouri.
You got it.
And we have as our special guest today,
Hannah Kelly.
And you're the state representative for which district?
Yes, sir. I'm state representative for 141st District, which composes all of Wright and part of Webster County.
That was going to be my next question. You preempted me.
I'm fast on the draw today.
I'm appreciative. And we're so appreciative that you're in studio in St. Louis and we're not doing this by trickery.
Remote.
I've been really excited about this show because we have not had somebody from your part of the state on Politically Speaking. Before I ask you about yourself or your political background, tell me a little bit about the area that you represent.
So, like I said, all of Wright County, part of Webster. And the piece of Webster that I'm quite proud about is Niangua, Missouri. Not just because it has a convenience store called Hannah's General Store, but that's also where Senator Blunt was born.
I knew that, yeah.
And so I go right up to the Marshfield city limits. I share Webster County with Representative John Black. He just replaced Lyndall Fraker, who now works in the administration, is doing a fantastic job. But we do miss him in the House, but John has been doing well and teaching me a lot, quite frankly, just the short time he's been in the House. Anyway, so my area, as we were just discussing, I have a large population of Amish and Mennonite, and lots of agriculture, small business. Healthcare is a big deal. We've got a couple FQHCs.
So an FQHC is?
Federally Qualified Health Center. Thank you. I've got some. It's like first I mess up the knob and then I'm getting all choked up. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Jeez, I'm sorry. You're like, go back to Wright County, Hannah. Anyway, so interesting point in regards to healthcare and Amish, and a little bit of policy that I focus on. I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but I have this huge Amish population that use buggies. That's how they get around. And if they don't use a buggy, they have to hire somebody to drive them. And a while back, I went to visit a nurse practitioner who strictly serves the Amish community. And it was one of the most incredible things I've ever witnessed. And it kind of has driven my passion for helping nurse practitioners from the legislative standpoint to make sure that they can serve rural Missouri. I'm 31 years old, and we just now got a new doctor in our community for the first time in my adult life, which I think is sad, yet very poignant to the fact that getting healthcare professionals in rural Missouri is crucial more than ever. And so it's something I'm very passionate, and those who pay attention to my bills in Jefferson City know that I care a lot about that.
So, Representative, can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into politics? And I'm interested to hear if you grew up in the area you represent, or?
Yes, I was born and raised in Norwood, and it's about 60 miles east of Springfield. I think the population currently is right over 500 people. And so those who know me back home would look at you still to this day and say, we would have never said that Hannah's going to be in politics. But here I am. I went to college like every kid does after high school, or most kids I like to think, and not quite knowing what you want, right? Well, nothing was working out. It was all going south. And to make a very long story short, I ended up going to real estate school because I wanted to make my dad happy, because that was what he suggested since he knew I was hating college. And I went to real estate school thinking, I'm going to do this. This is going to be a thing I do, and I'm going to forget I ever did it. Well, needless to say, about a year later, I sold my first home, and I knew right then that that was something that I wanted to do. And so I have been in real estate since 18. I was 18. Yeah, almost 19.
So you're like a veteran real estate agent.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is I got experience early on in being the youngest person in the room, having to convince individuals who have been in fields far longer than I have of why I wanted the job, why I wanted the listing, why I wanted to work with companies and different things. You know, back then the foreclosures, unfortunately, were really strong, and there was a strong foreclosure market even in rural Missouri. And unbeknownst to me, I was getting good practice for politics in a way that I didn't even realize. But the seat came open. Tony Duggar served before me, and the seat came open, and I got a phone call from my uncle, Van Kelly, who served before Tony Duggar, right? So I
actually do remember when he served in the Missouri House while working for the Columbia Tribune.
Yeah.
And he's running for state senate
yes,
this time.
Yes, sir, he is.
So he's trying to make a comeback.
He's trying to make a comeback. I always tell him, I'm like, this is all your fault, because he called me the first time. He says, you need to run. I said, no, I don't. I love my career. I make great money. I don't need to do this. And so he called me again in about 4 months. And for whatever reason at that point in time, I said, you know what, I'll pray about it. And 3 days later, I knew it was the direction I needed to go. And the rest is history. I won my first primary by 45 votes.
A landslide victory.
Right? I knew I had won when Todd Richardson called me. And he said, landslide Kelly, are you ready to get to work?
And just for our listeners, this part of the state, the Republican primary is tantamount to election. Because I think it's been a Republican area for decades. It's not one of the rural parts that was Democratic and then went Republican. I think it's been Republican for a long time. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's one of the reasons why I voted against the closed primary bill this last year, because I feel so passionately about what you just explained as being representative of my district. And a neat add-on to this conversation, there was a Democrat individual, an individual who is a Democrat Party member, and he was asked to run against me, and he told him no. And he told me, he said, Hannah, I told him I don't agree with you on everything, but I like you. And he goes, plus, you work harder than I want to work.
But what you're trying to say,
building that respect is so important.
That's actually that's a phenomenon in St. Louis too, which is a heavily Democratic area where a lot of Republicans actually vote in Democratic primaries, so they can have a say for St. Louis alderman, state representative, state senator, county executive. Even St. Louis County, which has a lot of Republicans in it, has become such a Democratic stronghold that I think a lot of Republicans do exactly what your friend did and vote in Republican primaries because they want to say of who their legislators are.
Right. Absolutely. But where were we at? I get off on rabbit trails.
So you had said before we started the podcast that you own a coffee shop too?
Yes. So I own a coffee shop with my parents. My sister runs it, and it's frozen custard and coffee. And so when I decided to run for office, I always said I wanted to connect Jefferson City with my district. And so now it's a well-known fact among, lobbyists who have issues to talk about and work on, and my colleagues, that I ask you to come to my district. And so I've gotten lots and lots of coffee fans. We sit over coffee and discuss matters. But to make a long story short, yes, I own a coffee shop, and I have learned more than I ever learned in the last 2 years compared to my many years of real estate. It's food service is completely different than selling houses, let me tell you that.
I was going to say.
So yesterday, Governor Parson called a special session to address a car sales tax issue. Basically, the Department of Revenue had, for a while, been allowing people to trade in more than one vehicle and use that to get a credit against a new car sales tax, basically. And the state Supreme Court said, no, you can only trade in one vehicle, or I think certain types of boats, to get this credit. He wants this special session to be called. He wants the legislature to clarify that, no, you can trade in more than one vehicle or boat and get this tax credit. I guess he has framed it as a rural issue.
Yes.
He is from a rural area, and I was wondering if you could explain why this is something that affects rural Missourians.
Absolutely. Well, as we were talking about the coffee shop earlier, and the gentleman that repairs my espresso machine keeps 14 to 15 trucks on the road at a time. He has a very small business. I am 60 miles east of him. He is my only resource to fix that espresso machine. So if his trucks are in poor repair, if he can't get out on the road, then I cannot facilitate jobs on my end and provide product to people. And that's just one example, but I would include farmers primarily, HVAC companies, which abound across rural Missouri, as well. I mean, the list can go on and on and on, but you'll have school fleets is another thing that just comes to my mind. I know, I think my schools in my district at least have 2+ vehicles apiece. The point is, it is very much a rural issue, and it ranges a broad spectrum, but I think that folks will find it benefits not just rural Missouri, but it impacts the entire state. And we're just trying to make sure that there's no overreach into the citizens' pockets because of the fact that we have a legislature that passed the statute. We want to clarify the statute to make sure of what I believe is the proper check and balance of government. When the court has interpreted it one way, we know what we intended and we know what is best for the folks back home, and that's to make sure that government's not taking too much. And we're going to be in veto session. We're mandatorily required.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
so for our listeners, and I looked at the schedule for the House, they're going to vote on, I think, this bill very quickly and
Yes.
then go into veto session. So as far as like them legislators taking a lot of time, that's not the case.
Exactly.
But the question has come up, like, why do this during veto session and not do it during the regular session? Have you gotten a sense from your constituents that there's a sense of urgency here? Like, what have you heard on that front?
I think that all comes down to a matter of opinion. I'm always, because of my opinions and because of my deeply held beliefs, I'm always going to side on the fact that, as we discussed earlier, this is during veto session. We are constitutionally required to be there already. And our small businesses, our farmers are the backbone of this state. And coming from a farming family, coming from a small business family, and as a small business owner, these decisions, when they have to be made, can vitally impact the future success or failure of your endeavor. And I, for one, would feel really, really bad if waiting till January impacted negatively on small businesses and farmers, not just in rural Missouri, but across the state.
Another issue that I think is affecting rural Missouri is feral hogs. And I know people are going to be like, you're only talking about feral hogs because there was a meme on Twitter about feral hogs. But
see, I actually haven't seen the meme. You brought that up a while ago, and I haven't seen it.
I don't even remember what it is, but it's not super important. People are just using the term feral hogs to be funny, I think.
A famous singer-songwriter, Jason Isabel, who is apparently in favor of gun control measures, said, "There's no reason for people to have an automatic weapon." This is after the recent shootings. And a man from Arkansas responded and said, "Well, it might help me deal with feral hogs who come onto my property." And it kind of kickstarted this, in my opinion, was a big urban-rural divide, because I think a lot of people in urban areas really don't understand that feral hogs are a
serious
problem.
On the contrary, I would disagree. They do understand that they are a very serious problem. There is much controversy as how to handle them. As I'm sure that you know, I was appointed appropriations chairman for the Department of Conservation this last session. And so I've had a lot of learning to do. My learning curve has been huge, and I'll be the first one to say it. Director Polly has been very gracious, along with members of the commission, to sit down and visit with me on multiple instances. Now, and I always contingent all this with, I'm not married, but they tell me that husbands and wives don't agree all the time. And we have, Department of Conservation and myself have had our disagreements. I'm not completely on board with their current approach to feral hogs. But we are working through the particulars of what their approach is and how perhaps we, as a legislature that only has appropriations power, now for the record, what that means is all we have power over is the factor of what they can and cannot do with their money.
Right, because just for our listeners, the Conservation Department is funded by, I believe, a sales tax
That is
surcharge.
correct. That's correct.
And it goes directly to the Department of Conservation, which means the legislature cannot really dictate where that money goes to many respects.
You're exactly right. We have the authority to put in black and white within the state budget that we are mandatorily required to balance every year as to what we would like them to do with the money. We try to, and they've been good in many instances to work with us. And I'm very grateful for that. But again, this issue we are working on. I actually had a conversation with Aaron Jeffries with Conservation just a couple days ago about feral hogs. I noticed that they are doing TV advertisements. And I'm curious to the approach of that. And they're going to be getting back with me as to why that is a good approach at this point. Where the controversy lies is whether or not you can hunt them, right? So Representative Dinkins is doing some great work to encourage that we keep the public lands open for hunting.
So lands that are owned by the Department of Conservation.
Department of Conservation as well as the federal lands. Mm-hmm. And so the reason for that would be, of course, to help work on the issue of eradicating. But according to promulgated rules by the Department of Conservation, they would rather, if you see hogs, to let conservation come in and trap them and then kill, because there is a hypothesis, if I am choosing the right word, that when you shoot a hog, it can split a herd and cause an even bigger problem in the future. Okay, there's much drama over the issue sometimes, but the real issue at the bottom of the day is that we need to get to the bottom of the issue because it's hurting farmers.
I was just going to say,
hurting farmers.
I wanted to ask,
it really is.
My understanding is, the reason this is a serious issue is the feral hogs are getting onto, agricultural land and destroying some of the land, basically. I want you to explain, why this is a really big problem.
When your livelihood depends on the crops, and a feral hog, group of feral hogs comes in and rips those crops up before they're ready to go, that's a huge problem because then you can't pay your bills. It's actually quite simple math at the end of the day, and that's why I care about it so much. And again, for the record, I'm working with the department to better understand their approach and to make sure that we come together with the best outcome, which would be getting rid of the issue. But we're not there yet. We got a lot of work to do.
Right. For some perspective, a feral hog is, and I wrote this down, can weigh over 200 pounds. And they produce 40 to 50 other hogs in a single year.
That is what I understand. Yep.
Yeah.
You've done your research. Good job.
So they proliferate really quickly.
Yes, ma'am, they do.
And it sounds like everyone knows there's a problem. The question is whether trapping only is the right way to go or hunting and trapping is the right way to go.
Yes. And I want to clarify on kind of what we've already talked about, that you do have the leeway to hunt hogs on your own property.
Right.
You can shoot the hogs, but it's just the conservation is asking you to trap them. And again, in the spirit of honesty, and they know this, I believe I disagree with that approach. I think that hog hunters shouldn't be held back from going and hunting. And that's where the current conversation is right now. Do we keep the grounds open? Do we close them? Time will tell what works, and continue conversations and efforts to make a good outcome. But we do have a problem, and it is a serious problem for farmers.
In Texas Monthly tells me that there is a law that allows people to hunt feral hogs from a helicopter. The jury is out on how effective it is, but just so Missouri is not the only one dealing with this problem.
No, apparently it's a big problem everywhere. Another agriculture issue I wanted to touch on with some depth is confined animal feeding operations. This has been an issue that I've actually been covering on and off for well over a decade. There has been a lot of tension between some of these larger farms and counties that want to put more stringent regulations on them compared to the state government. I mentioned this on another show, but when he was a Republican, Chris Koster actually was the sponsor of the original CAFO county ordinance bill. It got filibustered into oblivion. He became a Democrat, but I don't think he ever repudiated his views on it. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons he got a lot of ag commodity groups endorsements. And then flash forward to this session, legislation that I think is similar to that basically says to counties, you can't pass a CAFO ordinance that's stricter than the state did pass and was signed into law. I want to make sure I'm getting that background
and
correctly.
you are getting that background correctly. Again, we discussed where I'm from. I hadn't seen any press on it in my area until 3 days ago. There was an op-ed by a well-intended person, I have no doubt, who made the suggestion when I read the article, there was a suggestion given that by passing the bill that we've just wiped away all regulation. I want to be very clear, that is not the case. Our DNR works in conjunction in regards to the Clean Water Act. We have very stringent regulation of these confined animal operations. And all that bill does is ensure that the large operations are not regulated out of business, because a local municipality is influenced by what is most often outside interest to go above and beyond very stout and strong state regulations that are held as an example by many people across the nation, to my understanding and the research that I've put in.
Now, there have been other people who have come on this show, primarily Democrats, who have heavily criticized this bill. And one of the reasons I'm glad that you're on the show is I want to play some of those contentions and have you respond to them.
You bet.
The first one is from Representative Doug Clemens. He was on the show, I think, a few weeks ago, and he made this point about why he voted against this legislation.
3 days out of the week leaving the floor, I literally would lean over to a Republican as we're walking out of the chamber and say, why is it that I'm defending local control against the local control party every day of this session? And time again, this has happened. They mandated our school year length from a state level, so school boards can't set their own school year anymore. And here we go with concentrated animal feeding operations.
So that was an argument that I think you probably heard a lot on the floor,
Yes, sir.
including from him,
Yes.
about that this is an infringement of local decision-making. I want you to respond to that.
So as I was sharing with you earlier, I visited the Webster County Democrats the other night, and they asked me the same exact question, and this is my response. We are not taking away the ability of the local authority to regulate within the umbrella of the state authority. That has not been taken away. If they want to set specific guide rails within what's already set at the state level, that's fine. They want to set their own unique brand of what fits under the umbrella of the state, that's great. They just cannot expand it. And so, furthermore, when I am asked to make a decision between job creation, because for a lot of people, these operations give the opportunity to go to work and have a good job and know that you have steady income, no matter what's happening with the cattle market, as we know, which has been very up and down here recently. For a small producer would be much more impacted than a bigger operation, right? I've seen situations where folks can go to these operations, have a job, and have 30 head back at home on the family farm, and actually be able to, for once, get ahead while building an operation on the side. And that's just one example of many. But jobs, period. When I ran for office, I promised I would look at every opportunity to bring quality jobs to the 141st District. And I do not look at this piece of legislation as taking away local control, because we still give the opportunity to work, again, what I like to call in my very plain language, work your own brand of policy for that you feel works with your local level. The specification is, don't go over the state regulations that are already proven to work well and already held to high standard by many. Don't run the jobs out of my area in the name of clean water and all of that, when we have stringent standards already as a state that we know work and are working well. We have great folks at DNR. We have great folks at Missouri Department of Ag, and they are committed to upholding the regulations that exist. And I just cannot be for outside interest influencing local municipalities to not create jobs that are there and viable and strong. And that I would end with this. You like your beef at Walmart, or you like your $20 steak? I don't want to put either guy out of business. And it's not fair to the citizens of the state of Missouri to put either one out of business.
So what do you say to people who do have concerns about water quality? I think that they're probably looking at reports from a place like Iowa and saying, well, and I want to be clear, it's not entirely clear whether CAFOs are responsible for any water issues in Iowa, but I can see, or more relatable, people who might say, look, I just don't want to live like 500 yards from a CAFO, and I'm worried about my property and being close to,
a large farm, which may have a lot of byproduct from. But
right. So what my response to that would be first of all, my job and every elected representative's job, I believe, no matter the party that you ascribe to, is to hold government accountable. Okay, and so we all have our different opinions of what that looks like. But my response to that would be, if you call me and you say, Hannah, this is my concern, I first of all would begin to look and make sure that the operation was abiding by the rule of law. That no matter who you are, that should always be checked. And secondly, what comes to my mind is there's stringent setback rules. Okay, and from my understanding from the research that I've done, that also helps to ensure against the issues that you've brought up. I've got all that listed, but I don't want to bore our listeners with the mile-long page of stuff on my phone.
But
it's
like
easy. There's very much a process. Again, if you call me, you said, Hannah, check into this for me. I would call Carol Comer. I said, Carol, help me look at this. I would call Chris Chen, say, can you tell me that these folks are good?
Yeah, my understanding is CAFOs are regulated by the Department of Natural Resources, so they already are a regulated thing within the state.
Yes.
So I wanted them just to make that clear. We'll be back right after this short break with Representative Hannah Kelly.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.
And we're back with State Representative Hannah Kelly. I actually wanted to touch on an issue that you talked about in your introduction, and I guess that's bringing more healthcare providers and other people to your district.
Yeah.
I have a son with special needs, and one of the things that I have been told over and over again by rural lawmakers is that it's really difficult to attract special education or special needs personnel to rural areas. So I imagine the same principle applies to healthcare, and I wanted to just get your thoughts on like how you solve that problem, because if I am a person that has done all the education to become a doctor or a nurse practitioner or a special education teacher, I'm probably going to go to the place where I can make the most money, which is probably going to be in the suburban or urban areas.
Right.
And I would just assume that in a place like yours, which probably has a really palpable need for healthcare, that it's harder to attract people. So I wanted to get your take on this.
So one of the ways that I've been working on that with the help of Representative Shore and many others, he led the charge on this last year that I really played more of a support role on, and we got some good stuff done. But the impetus of where my focus has been is to make sure I would like to see us as a state is that if you are a nurse practitioner in the state of Missouri, that you can collaborate with a licensed physician in the state of Missouri within the geographic boundaries and not have the mileage restriction upon you. Now, the next answer that comes in this conversation is folks often say, well, what about telehealth? Because we know that there are no boundaries as long as you have telehealth. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I was just stopped by to see Representative Coleman at her house, and while I was there, my phone literally lost all service. And my whole area has had little to no Verizon cell phone service.
And you're talking about Representative,
Verizon, if you're listening.
You're talking about Mary Elizabeth Coleman, who lives in
St. Louis,
northern Jefferson County, which is a suburban area.
Right.
But continue.
And so my point with that being, telehealth is fantastic. The concept is fantastic. But if you don't have service, then you're up the creek without a paddle, as we say in Wright County.
Yeah.
And so my passion is to make sure that if that nurse practitioner who wants to serve my underserved, quite frankly, Amish constituents, that she doesn't have to search high and low to get a collaborating doctor, because collaborating with someone is work. It takes investment. It takes time. And not everybody wants to do it, right? So when you've got mileage restrictions on you, it creates an added burden for the nurse practitioner who may be willing to serve rural Missouri. And so again, my simple goal, straightforward goal, broad picture is to remove those mileage restrictions within the state of Missouri. Now, there are many who will go further than that to say that they want prescription authority and things like that. I believe that's another conversation for later on down the road. I believe in picking one battle at a time when you're focusing on important, vital issues like this. And again, I go back to, I'm 31 years old, and we just now got a doctor for the first time in my adult life that is willing to stay, not just passing through. And so I think that's very important, and that's why I care about it. And so, like I said, the mileage restriction with collaboration in regards to nurse practitioners and physicians are where my main focus is on that.
Can you explain what the mileage restriction is?
Yes.
It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yes.
But
So the Board of Nursing has expanded, and I'm speaking here, we've jumped over all these subjects. I don't want to misquote for our audience, but the Board of Nursing has expanded that mileage ratio, I believe, from 50 miles to 75 is where we're at. So to give you an example, I'm 60 miles east of Springfield. So yes, we have doctors situated in the local area around my district, but I know from experience not enough to give the help that's needed. And that's just one simple answer of many as to why it's vital and important for the future of healthcare in Missouri, I believe.
So I want to shift gears to next year's election cycle. It's 2020 already.
I can't believe it.
I mean, this will be my 8th or 9th election cycle I've covered.
And you don't have any gray hair. How is that?
I do have gray hair, like right here. What is your expectations for Republicans? Because it seems like Republicans are set up well, but I've seen a situation like in 2008 where after they won 2004, they were almost wiped off the ballot. What's kind of your expectations?
My expectation is that we win across the board, but I know that in order to win, you have to put the hard work in. I know that myself and many, many other colleagues are willing to put that work in and already putting that work in to get out and give our message to the people. I myself have witnessed firsthand how much how great of a grassroots foundation Governor Parson has, not just in rural Missouri, but across the state. That man has done so much work to make sure that he has connected across the spectrum. I think he's going to reap the benefit of that hard work. I think you're going to see that Governor Parson is going to be there for the swearing in and ready to roll into another term and continue to do some really great things for the people of Missouri. And I know that he's going to have my help and so many others in leading that charge to see that goal accomplished. And as far as a statewide, of course, I'm a huge fan of Scott Fitzpatrick. Oh my gosh, that guy, he's a good man. And
you guys are the same age, too.
We are.
You were each 31 years old.
Yes.
And
yes.
I often said that once a statewide official was younger than me, that was a sign of my creeping mortality.
Well, when I wanted to be on the budget committee, and he was one of a few people that made the effort to help me get on there. And that's when I got to know him, and we had a lot of good conversation about what our goals were for the state, what our vision was for Missouri and for our people, and just have really grown to respect him and excited about his reelect. And then, of course, you have Schmidt and then
Kehoe
and Ashcroft, and just incredible gentlemen that are truly serving with what I like to call a servant's heart. Kehoe came down to my district a couple weeks ago, brought his pancake wagon, and just sat there and talked to people, and that really meant a lot to me. Nobody in my town's ever had Lieutenant Governor come
he
cook
literally brought a
flapjacks.
wagon full of
Literally
a wagon.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I want to see it.
It is so fantastic. But what I got the biggest to me was just the connection with every single person who came in there. He was taking the time to listen, to hear. And, Ashcroft has been doing a lot of great work, whether it be in regards to libraries. He's been doing a lot of county visits, which I highly respect, because that takes time.
Yeah.
That takes time.
It's
And
a
he's
big
been
thing.
putting the effort in, and he's been going around. And Attorney General Schmidt has been working very, very hard. I laughed this morning in reference to Attorney General Schmidt. I don't know if you saw Scott Fitzpatrick's tweet. He had a ball stuck in the rim.
Yeah, I saw that.
Where's Eric Schmidt when you need him?
Because if our listeners don't know, Eric Schmidt is very, 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 very
tall. He's very tall. But I'm sure that Eric was already hard at work for the folks in Missouri, and that's probably why he wasn't there tonight. Yeah.
Well,
just a comment about Governor Parson visiting all parts of the state. Today, he was in North St. Louis, the city, which I can't imagine is anything like where he's from.
No,
you're absolutely right.
And also a place that
probably
it's probably not going to vote for him, just to be candid.
Yeah. But he's still, and that's what we see with the statewide ticket of Republican office holders, and they're taking the time in every sector of the state. I mean, every single one of them. I've seen them connecting with the people, listening to the people. I don't know if you've been watching Josh Hawley's Twitter feed.
I have.
Has it not been phenomenal?
Julie and I have actually been talking about that. It's definitely something I haven't seen a politician do recently. And you do see some photos of him, but it's really focusing on the people.
Yep.
And I also noticed that even though it's rural Missouri, he made an effort to talk to African Americans in rural Missouri, which there's a large African American population scattered throughout rural Missouri that often gets forgotten.
Yes. Yeah, it was an interesting approach. It almost looks like, and I'm going to be careful here, it's not journalism. He has, it's his staff and him doing it, but it's an interesting approach. As Jason said, he's almost telling, for our listeners who haven't seen it, he's doing like vignettes with different people he's meeting, and there's a lot of focus on that person and what they do and their concerns. It's interesting. It's definitely
I find
interesting.
it very refreshing. And, in reference to my history and why I sit here today, my grandpa served that area that he covered day before last. And I called Ray, who works on his staff. I said, Ray, I just want you to know, I think that's incredible. Because if my grandpa were still here, he would be quite proud that somebody was taking the time to tell stories of people that don't generally get visits from someone in his position.
One issue that I want to ask you about affecting the election is HB 126, which is the 8-week abortion ban. Now, before I play Nicole Galway's clip, you voted for this bill, and you were actually one of the people that spoke out in favor of the bill. We've had proponents on, but as I was telling you before the show, we have not had a female Republican come on the show and explain why they support that.
Yes.
So I want to give you the opportunity to explain why you supported that bill.
I grew up in rural Missouri, and I grew up one of 6 children. I was fortunate to have a happy, healthy home. And I understand, as a licensed foster mom, that not all children, not all families are blessed to have what I had. And I speak today with full authority of my daughter, who, in her exact words, told me, Hannah, always tell my story. Because if it helps to make Missouri a better place, then it should be told. She had a son at a very young age and put him up for adoption. And it is such a beautiful story. And my daughter is getting ready to graduate now, making plans for college. I've met her son. He's an incredible human being. I can't wait to see what his future holds. The joke around my house is that I'm already a grandma, and I'm only 31. But I say all that to say, as a person of deeply held faith, and as a person who believes that life begins at conception, I cannot apologize, and I won't apologize for the stand that we took by passing that bill. I've been asked, well, Hannah, how would you feel about, why did you have to go so far as rape and incest? And that's the conversation. It's always the white elephant in the room. We have, again, I refer to my foster experience. We have over almost 13,000 children in our foster system. I've had 9 go through my home in the last 2 years. And I have seen from all walks of life the struggles that are very real and the triumphs and the sadness that come with that reality of being in the foster system. But there's one thing that I take away from that I know will never change, and that is that I will never forget the faces. And they are not in that. I tell every child who comes into my home, you have the chance to make good decisions for your future and build your future. And your value is not dependent on what happened and what got you to today. And I either believe that or I don't. But I will tell you that as someone who has never had the privilege of having biological children, those who know me know that I have 15 nieces and nephews. I've been there for the first ultrasound. I've been there. I've felt the babies kick. I have held those precious babies in my hands. My oldest nephew, he was born with his intestines outside of his body, and the doctors gave my sister-in-law the option to seek an abortion before he was born. And that precious little boy now, I can't imagine what the world would be missing out if he wasn't here. And because I believe in the integrity and the sanctity of life, that is why you will always see me voting yes to protect life, and you will always see me fighting back anytime that I think the integrity and sanctity of life, even at the unborn stage, is being harmed or attacked in any way, shape, or form.
First of all, thank you for sharing your perspective on that. I think it's important for our listeners to know. Obviously, you know that not everybody shares that perspective, including some major Democratic candidates like Auditor Nicole Galloway. This is what she had to say about that issue a couple days ago.
Women do truly fear for their personal safety, and when people in positions of power either don't consider or do not or disregard how their policymaking plays into their fears, it creates additional fears for those women and those individuals. It is extreme, it is cruel, and Governor Parson has championed that. You even have Republicans coming out saying that it is too extreme and cruel, and I believe that it is.
Have you had any constituents come to you and say, you made a mistake by voting for this, this was too extreme, you know, you should have had a rape or incest exception in here? Like, what has been the response of the people you represent for you voting yes to this bill?
Now I want to proceed carefully but I also want to honestly answer.
Sure, you don't have to say the names of the constituents. Obviously, I want to make. But I understand what you're going there. But I do want to just ask, what is the reaction been?
So I shared with you that the Democrats in Webster County invited me to come speak to them the other night. That was the first point blank opposition I had ever gotten. I had some private conversations with individuals who asked me, Hannah, why wasn't there an exclusion? And when I share my belief of why there shouldn't be one, by the end of the conversation, of the 3 times, I think off the top of my head, that I got asked in my district outside of the visiting with the Democrats Association the other night, everyone walked away going, you know what, I absolutely respect your view and I'm with you. I didn't think it from the perspective that you do. I didn't see it from the perspective that you do in your why. And I would add to that, I respectfully disagree with Nicole, because the facts of it is that we either value human life or we don't. And so with that, if you will look back in the legislation, you will see that we took the tax credit cap off of the Pregnancy Resource Center donations for the statewide. And there's some framework in there, but we basically made it to where we incentivize folks to aid and assist with what I like to call a public-private partnership to help moms and babies, and basically empowering through the local level to make sure that folks get what they need. That is something that is a reality all across Missouri. Pregnancy resource centers are thriving, and moms and babies, more importantly, are thriving and getting what they need. And I think it's only going to increase because of it. And I think we're going to see large-scale benefits from that move. But the piece that I handled in 126, and was very glad to have a part in handling, had to do with the insurance and making sure that if you are performing abortions, that you carry a proper amount of insurance.
I think it raised it from a certain amount to a higher amount, basically.
Yes. Again, my impetus is to protect life. And I would want someone to speak for me if I didn't have a voice. The same reason why I love to make sure that my Amish folks are taken care of. They may not be able to vote, but I still serve them. Those unborn babies may not be able to speak, but I still serve them. And I will still give account for what I have and have not done.
I actually have questions about your foster parent experience. That's quite a thing when you are a single person to take on.
It is.
Foster
I'm not going to say I have it all figured out.
Foster children. So could you talk to me a little bit about what made you start taking in foster kids and your experience a little bit?
Senator Andrew Koenig is a foster parent, and I've always admired the work that his family has done in that role. And he was honestly the initial one that inspired me. And I don't know if I've really ever directly told him that. But if you'll remember, back in the Greitens administration, we had a foster omnibus bill. I just got elected. I was still like, holy cow, what have I done? I'm here. Okay. And I'm sitting in the Children and Families room and committee room, and I'm listening to all this foster care omnibus stuff. And I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking, there is no one in the house. There's no one in the house that's a foster parent. And I'm sitting here learning huge stats, along the lines of almost 13,000 children and all of these things with, drug addiction and abuse and horrible, unfortunate things that happen. And I decided, for what I thought at the time, all the right reasons, well, I'm going to go get my license and I'm going to understand this. But I made it very clear to my caseworker that I was not going to take any full-time placement, and don't ask me to give a lot of respite care. But 9 kids later, here I am, and I love it so much. And I'm already sad because my daughter's graduating and going to college, and I'm already telling him, you gotta don't forget me. We'll figure it out. Don't forget me.
I mean, I also wanted to ask, so it sounds like you took at least one older kid, which is normally it's harder to place older children.
Yes, it's very hard. I actually have the stats in my email. We're getting ready. I chair the Child Abuse and Neglect committee that will be having a hearing over veto session. And we are going to be talking about the fact that the population in that 13,000 and under mark that I keep referring to is a huge number. It's a huge number. And I'm very passionate about making sure that we equip and empower them to be productive, happy adults. And that's where I find myself having the most, involvement with is the teenagers. Yeah.
So before we let you go,
Yep.
One of the new features we're having on this show
Yep.
that Julie came up with, I'm giving her 100% credit for this. If you could point to 1 or 2 things in your district that you would recommend somebody who's never been there go to,
Yep.
where would they be?
Swank Lavender Farm in Seymour, Missouri. Congresswoman Hartzler stopped there with me just a couple days ago. And then I have a glass milk bottling company, and they have some of the best milk you will ever taste.
Oh, my gosh.
And if I'm not mistaken, I always hesitate. I don't want to mix quote, but I think that they may be like 1 of 2 left in the state or something like that. But their milk is divine.
Julie, do you drink milk?
I do.
I do not. I am basically lactose intolerant.
I'm sorry.
It was by choice, so you don't have to apologize.
Okay.
It's my own fault.
Whatever. Jason doesn't have to go there.
They make some of the best chocolate milk you've ever had.
I mean, I'm already like, what?
And where is this? What
Mountain
city?
Grove.
Mountain Grove?
Yep. Lieutenant Governor Kehoe stopped by. He's actually put their milk on his pancake trailer.
Oh, that is awesome. Representative, thank you so much for coming.
You.
We will definitely have you back. And
I look forward to
we're
it.
looking forward to having you back for all of our stories at SteelPublicRadio.org. Follow me on Twitter at @JRosenbaum. Follow Julie on Twitter at
JS O'Donohue.
And how would people follow you on Twitter or any other parts of the World Wide Web?
Hannah Kelly Moe. And then I'm also on Facebook as well.
Thank you very much. Until next time, so long.